This is the iPhone 14 Pro, brand new for 2022. It's had some pretty major upgrades this year and some not so much. And if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, is it worth the upgrade this year? Well, I've spent a bit of time with this phone now and I've got some thoughts and pretty strong opinions. So let's get into it. Hello you beautiful humans, it is Gemlang here and welcome to another video. Well, like clockwork, Apple brings out a brand new iPhone every single year, and this year no exception. The iPhone 14 Pro has had the biggest upgrade to the camera in years. It's not since the iPhone 6S, which came out in 2015, that the megapixel count has actually been upgraded from 12 megapixels to 48 megapixels this year. I'm not going to go through all the tech specs because you've already seen all those videos and it's already been covered. What I'm going to talk about is the general use of the phone and my thoughts, especially about the dynamic island, and then going to get into the camera. Is it worth the upgrade? First up, let's talk about the colors. Well, the space black. To be honest, like they said it was going to be a new black, and it's nice, but I was actually expecting it to be blacker.
Got any blacker?
And the new purple color, yeah, it's nice. It's not my personal taste, but once you see it in the flesh, it's actually pretty nice. So what I like about this phone is just how familiar it is. When you pick up an iPhone with iOS, you just know how to use it. It is so intuitive, and the upgrade with iOS 16, it's nice, it's comfortable, it is so easy to use, and you just know where everything is. Okay, so let's talk about that dynamic island. Yeah, it is very Apple-esque way of doing the cutout. It's good that the notch is gone. I was like excited that it was going to be a bit different to that. And it is a very intuitive way of Apple to embrace that cutout. And I don't mind it. After a little while, you don't notice it anyway when you're watching videos and playing games. I mean, it doesn't really matter because you're normally looking in the middle of the screen anyway. I quite like how when you swipe, it is responsive to how you swipe up. If you go up, it's straight. If you go left or right, it does a little bit of a curveball. And also shout out to Apollo for embracing it with their little pixel pets. You got to check that out. And that always on display. Yeah, look, it's a nice feature. I know it's taken years for Apple to catch up because it's been in Android for years. I don't think it's done the best way. I don't like how you can always see the background and the notifications. One thing I have definitely noticed is the battery drop. 100%, the battery just doesn't last as long as what it did with the 13 Pro. I don't know if it's got to do with the always on display. I'm sure there's going to be some people that'll test that. I've got a feeling it could be. Also, Apple have said that it could be the haptic engine because you can now enable haptic touch with the keyboard. It could also be optimization with iOS 16 because that could be a factor as well, but the battery is definitely not lasting as long as it did in previous years, but we'll see what happens. I think with the always on display, a good way to do it would be to remove the background so you just see the time and the widgets and the notifications at the bottom. It's a pretty interesting take that Apple has done, but I don't think it's quite right. One thing I have noticed is that since the always on display is there, I'm not picking up my phone as much, which that's a bonus, right? And with every year, the main processor gets a bit of a boost. This year, the A16 bionic chip. Look, to be honest, I haven't really noticed a difference in performance. It still feels the same as the iPhone 13 Pro, which had the A15 bionic, which is now in the iPhone 14. Yeah, I know it gets confusing, doesn't it? But one thing I was expecting a little bit better performance in was doing the ProRes RAW 48 megapixel photos. I was actually expecting it to be a little bit faster. I mean, it's still good. It still plays games fast, still does editing and video, and swiping through all your apps still responsive and fast. So, I mean, I guess it's still good. So let's talk about those cameras. The main camera getting a major upgrade this year, going from 12 megapixels to 48 megapixels. Now, not every photo you take is going to be at 48 megapixels. You actually need to enable ProRes RAW and have it enabled in your settings to go from 12 megapixels to 48 megapixels. It does increase your file size. I do not recommend that you take every single photo in ProRes RAW at 48 megapixels. It will definitely eat up your iCloud storage and your storage on your phone very quickly. And if you're just taking photos at home or whatever, it's just not necessary. If you're going to be editing them in Lightroom, for example, or Visco or Snapseed, sure, it is definitely worth doing, but just enable it. Just hit it at the top so you can do that. They've also changed the focal distance on the main camera, going from 26mm to now 24mm, which I actually think is a quite nice focal length to use. It doesn't give you the distortion on the side, and it's still a wide camera. And also with the new camera upgrade, with the bigger sensor, it now gives you the option of doing 2x. So it's giving you 48mm, theoretically a fourth camera lens on your phone when still only having 3. It's now very close to that 50mm, which is a very popular focal length to use for photographers and videographers. It's really good for portraits, and also because of the bigger sensor, you're also getting more natural depth of field. So it's actually really good for portraits without using portrait mode. And speaking of portrait mode, look, to be honest, I still don't think it is quite right. As you can see here from my cat Rufus, the outline is just not quite right. And this donut, yeah, look, it's struggling. It's not quite right. With the new sensor, it does give a really nice natural looking bokeh depth of field. I actually personally quite like that compared to the portrait mode. But that comes down to your personal preference if you want to use it or not. But me personally, yeah, I could take it or leave it. One big thing I've noticed is the dynamic range has improved on the camera. I've purposely underexposed this photo and bumped it up to a normal exposure, and being able to pull the detail out of those shadows is actually quite impressive. And that is all thanks to the 48 megapixel and the pixel binning on the new sensor, and also being 65% larger. Now, Apple has its own way of processing the photos to make it look vibrant and sharp and looking nice and visually pleasing to the eye. This year, they're using Photonic Engine, which is a brand new neural processing power AI that they've used for processing the photos. Look, I think it needs a bit of more improvement. I personally think that the photos are being over sharpened to my taste. That is completely up to you, whether you feel that or not. But when I'm editing the photos, if I am just bringing that sharpness down a little bit. It's definitely an upgrade from the neural engine from previous year with Deep Fusion. But when you take a photo, you can actually see the processing of it happening before your eyes when you take a photo. Look, it is good, and it is definitely improved from last year, but I still don't feel like it is quite there. It just needs a little bit of tweaking, but you can do that yourself when you edit the photo if you need to. Macro photos are still really nice feature to have. Look, it's definitely improved from previous year as well. They're not quite sharp. I know it's quite funny comparing when I'm talking about the Photonic Engine where it was over sharpening the photos. I feel like the macro shots are not quite sharp enough, but they're still really good. It's really nice to be able to get in close and maybe get some really nice shots of your food or flowers or bugs, whatever you're into. And I'm really digging the ultra wide lens. It is still one of my favorite options to use on the phone. It just gives you a really nice different perspective, and with the distortion of the lines, I actually quite like it. It's a good look. It's something different and it's unusual. Okay, so let's talk about the video capabilities. Well, before I get into it, there is a feature for those not living in North America, maybe in Asia or Australia like me. You can now select PAL, so you can now record in 25 frames a second. Thank you. It's really good now for when you're editing and being able to put it in with your other videos. I'm very grateful for that. With the cinematic mode, it is actually quite improved from the previous year, now in 4K, and you can select 24 frames a second or 25 frames a second if you're using PAL. And I've given it a bit of a test, and it is definitely improved. Look, it's not going to beat your DSLR or mirrorless camera, but it's quite usable actually. And if I had no other camera and I just wanted to get a quick snippet of a client shoot or something to be able to put it in with another video, I think I'd be quite comfortable using that. I would also recommend turning off HDR. I think the processing is too high on it. It is too saturated. But look, that is down to personal preference as well. One thing on this iPhone, same as previous iPhones, is that when you're filming and there's lights in your shot, or even with photos as well, where it comes up with those artifacts from the lights. Look, I don't like them. They look digital, it's artificial, it's not a natural lens flare that you get with a DSLR or mirrorless camera. I'm not a fan of it. That's just my personal preference, but it would be nice if they were able to remove that in post, or if there was some AI that could process it to remove it. But hey, it's not going to stop me from using the camera. What I am really impressed with is the quality of the videos that are coming out of the iPhone 14 Pro. It's looking less and less like mobile phone footage, and it's looking pretty good, where it is pretty comparable to your bigger cameras now. I'm actually really impressed by it. So the iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max and those cameras, look, it's not going to replace your DSLR or mirrorless cameras, but if you're a content creator, it's going to be the best camera that you've got in your pocket at all times. It's going to be really good for posting on social media with your photography and video. It's going to be really good for that. If you've got an iPhone 13 Pro, look, it's probably not worth the upgrade, but anything earlier than that, then yes, this is definitely a worthy upgrade. As they pretty much say every single iPhone release, this is the best iPhone yet. And there's no exception. It is a really good phone. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. It does help me out a lot. My name is Jem Lang, and here's another video that the algorithm has served up for you. Thanks for watching.